This actually, at the beginning of the book, this is Ghost Ranch. This is the road just, near George O'Keeffe's house. There was almost no light by the time I arrived at Emily Dickinson's house. I had brought a small digital camera, and I started taking pictures in an abandoned way. I wasn't thinking about it. One of Dickinson's white dresses was displayed in a plexiglass case, and I found myself drawn to the detail of the dress, the alabaster buttons, the trim. If you took a picture of the whole dress from far away, it was just a simple white dress. But if you came closer, there was a beautiful ornateness to it. Emily and her sister lived alone in the house during the last years of their lives, and after they died, it was sold. It's a museum now, but for decades, other people lived in it. There was a second house in the museum compound, and the people who were showing us around asked us if we wanted to walk over to it. The light was nearly gone by then, and we started to say no, but we ended up taking a little path to the house next door. The houses very close to each other, only about 300 feet apart, and the second house belonged to Emily Dickinson's brother, Austin. Emily could see the path that led to Austin's house from her bedroom window. Austin's house was a revelation. I was stopped dead in my tracks. It was dark, mysterious. The wallpaper was falling off the walls. There were heavy curtains. Every bit of wall space had some kind of picture on it, oddly placed. The house had been left the way it was when Emily and Austin were alive. You could feel the people who lived there, and Austin's young son had died in one of their small bedrooms, and I found that I couldn't walk into it. I discovered that with the digital camera, I didn't need much light. It seemed like I could see into corners. There was none of the color and contrast distortion that you get with film when you push it. The camera was rendering things almost the way I was seeing them. I didn't pay much attention to the pictures I took then. I left them in contact sheets in my studio, mixed up with pictures from the bar mitzvah of my cousin's son. The bar mitzvah was the reason I was in Amherst that spring day, and much of my family had come up for the occasion, and my younger sister Paula, who is a history buff, had suggested that we visit the Dickinson house when we were there. Several years ago, Susan Sontag and I were planning something that we called the Beauty Book. The Beauty Book was going to provide an excuse for us to travel around to places we cared about and wanted to see, and for me, it meant going back to taking pictures when I was moved to take a picture, when there was not any agenda. I care about my assignment work, but I wanted to try working without that pressure, to be in a situation where I took a picture just because I saw it. And after Susan died, I knew I couldn't do the Beauty Book, although as time passed, I realized I might do a different book with a different list of places. The list would inevitably be colored by my memory of Susan and what she was interested in, but it would be my list. And this wasn't an idea that seemed obvious at first. It came gradually. Emily Dickinson was Susan's favorite poet. Two summers ago, I had some business problems that were extremely distracting. I was trying to spend a few weeks with my children at our place on the Hudson in upstate New York, but I kept having to go back to the city for meetings, and I would spend days sitting in rooms with lawyers. Well, this was not something that young children could understand. They were mad at me. We had planned a number of day trips that summer. The first trip I wanted to make, and the longest one, was to Niagara Falls. I thought that the kids would love Niagara Falls. Originally, we were going to take a train, and then I started to think about how my parents would have done something like this when I was growing up. I decided that the best thing to do was to go by car. It was a 6-hour drive. The children would eat dinner at home, put on their pajamas. We'd get there about midnight. I'd put them to bed in the hotel, and they would wake up whenever they felt like it. We'd open the curtains of the hotel room, and they would see the falls. The view would be a surprise. Well, everything went pretty well at first. Our friends Nick and Alex and their daughter Louie came along, and we pulled into the town on the Canadian side unscheduled. But when I went up to the desk of the hotel, the clerk said that they had canceled our reservation. At 11 o'clock, we ran your credit card, and it was rejected. We gave your rooms away. I said, "You did what?" Well, just then Sarah, my oldest daughter, who was not quite 8 got out of the car with her Winnie the Pooh bear and began crying, "Mommy, Mommy." And the 4-year-old twins woke up and started crying, and everyone was crying. The clerk said they had a motel on the other side of town where there were rooms. I got back into the car, headed in that direction, but I stopped at every place we passed trying to find a room that overlooked the falls. There was nothing. It was an August weekend, and everything was totally booked up. I had to resign myself to going to the motel suggested by the man who had given away our rooms. We took the last 2 rooms they had, and the kids fell asleep right away. Well, I was unbelievably depressed. When it became light the next morning, I got up and went over to the window and pulled open the curtains. I felt like such a failure. The view didn't seem to matter much to the kids. After they woke up, we got dressed and went down to the breakfast room where I had a long phone call with some lawyers. And then we went out on the boat, and everyone got wet. And while the kids had lunch, I had a conference call with more lawyers. I just wanted to go home. But Sarah asked if she could go to a place that Alex and Louie had been looking at. I said sure, and watched them as they skipped to a spot that overlooks the falls. After a while, I saw that they were mesmerized. I didn't quite get it, so I went to see what they were watching. It was extraordinary. You really felt like you were floating over the falls. I stood behind the children and took a picture.